I'm in my zone.
Hey, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and I'm bringing you guys a review for Disgaea 3, Absence of Detention. Now, for those not familiar with the Disgaea series, this is a new game. It's a remake of the Disgaea 3, Absence of Justice, which released in North America in August of 2008. I actually spent well over 100 hours on that game long before it got a patch in the middle of 2009 that added trophies to it. I personally really enjoyed the Disgaea games. They remind me of a deeper version of Final Fantasy Tactics. However, one problem with the Disgaea games is they're all pretty similar. Not a lot has changed between the games other than new stories, new characters, and a few new bells and whistles. But I guess, as the saying goes, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Pretty much every Disgaea game that has released has received very positive reviews, and the remake is no exception. It's already gotten some pretty good reviews from the major reviewers. There's no other Vita title out currently that has this amount of depth and content. Maybe Mod Nation Racer's Road Trip comes to mind, but if you're looking for a strategy RPG, this is going to be the #1 choice, and very well could stay that way for a while. Before I go into my thoughts on this title, let's do a quick recap of what this game offers over its original PlayStation 3 release from a few years back. For starters, you get all of the downloadable content that released for the original game, which includes an alternate storyline that you can play and new characters after you've completed the game, so there's a lot of replay value on this one. They added a couple new bosses from the PlayStation 3 Disgaea 4 title, along with a couple playable characters from that game, including Fuka and Desco. Also added is Terra level magic, so there's new magic spells in the game. There's new weapons such as the Stardust Sword and Ancient Spear, special super moves that activate when you're low on health, new class specific abilities, and the monster class can now equip up to 2 abilities. And finally, a data recording shop that has pretty much anything you would ever want to know about what you've done in the game. As far as Vita specific features, there's a GPS locator that grants you experience points for traveling around with your Vita, which to me seems kind of like a corny, silly feature, but I guess if you're on the go a lot, you can take advantage of that. The rear and front touchscreens do very minor things, like you can move your cursor around the map, but I quickly determined that using either of the touchscreens really wasn't worth the bother. The thing about the graphics is they look absolutely fantastic running on the Vita, but they are a bit small. So using your finger on the touchscreens to do pretty much anything on here is kind of pointless because of how small the cursor is, especially if you have larger fingers like I do, which you can adjust the camera angle from 3 different positions. You can zoom it a little bit closer to the action, but everything on here is still pretty small, especially when you're in combat. Which brings me to my next and only complaint with this game, but it is still worth pointing out. When you are in combat, the camera always zooms in on the action when you actually activate your moves, and to keep the game moving at a reasonable pace, it jerks the camera into the angle pretty quickly. Now, out of the 3 camera angles, if you're playing in either of the 2 that are zoomed more out, this jerking motion that zooms in can cause some serious eye strain. And while I did get used to it, I think it could be an issue for some people out there. I actually did get a headache my first time playing it for the first half hour, which it went away and it wasn't a problem later, but it's still worth pointing out. Now, other than that, I've pretty much had no complaints with this title. Any handheld system and RPGs go hand in hand with each other. In fact, role-playing games are the only reason I've ever owned a handheld system, and since I've purchased my Vita, I've spent 75% of my time playing Ogre Tactics. So naturally, a Disgaea game was a must-buy for myself. When this game first released for the PlayStation 3, a lot of people didn't really like the graphics on here. They were a bit pixelated, and I'll admit some parts of the game I thought looked pretty poor in the graphics category, but the amount of vivid colors that come popping out of the Vita screen really bring this one to life. I can't speak highly enough of how good this game looks color-wise. The text and menus are so sharp they could cut the screen in half, so really no complaints with the graphics at all. Now, the soundtrack on here is very off the wall and quirky, but it is upbeat, and no matter how long you play this title, which for most will be a very long time, the soundtrack never really gets old, with the exception of maybe a couple of the songs. The voice acting, while it's a bit silly, was very well done. You can also play the game with Japanese voiceovers if that's something that interests you. The game carries a very light-hearted tone with its storytelling. It's not really meant to be taken too seriously, and that comes out in all aspects of the game, including its oddball style of music. As far as if this game's worth buying or not will really come down to how much you like strategy RPGs. If you're not planning on buying a lot of Vita titles and you just want a select couple games to play, you can't go wrong with this one. But if you're more of a casual gamer that only wants to play a few minutes here or there, you own a lot of games, this probably isn't going to be the best choice. This is one of those games that you really have to spend a lot of time with. Now, if you did play the original PlayStation 3 release, I would still recommend picking this one up. There's enough new content here to warrant the cost of this game, and with so very few great RPG titles on the Vita, and with a few on the way, you can't go wrong with this one if you want a great role-playing game. Anyways, this is Zero at ReviewZoneHD, and thanks for stopping by.